Okay, so we're going to review bio test 1 through 4 today. I'm going to give you some sample questions. I'll pause and then I'll give you the answer. And then sometimes along the way, I'll just give you some information. So if a leafy sea dragon has leaf-like appendages that look like the fronds of the sea kelp beds where they live at, and this enables them to help not get eaten or captured by enemies, then this would be an example of a what? That would be an adaptation. Another question you may have on your test tomorrow is the characteristics of life. And there's an acronym that we have called SHREM Dog CADC. SHREM DOGCADC. So what do those stand for? The S would be stimulus, the H homeostasis, R reproduction, E energy, M metabolism. And that gives you the SHREM part. Then you have the dog part. D DNA, O organization, G growth. And then you have the CAD part. C cells, A adaptation, D DNA. And then the last one would be change. And that gives you SHREM Dog CAD-C, all of the characteristics of life. The other things you may not need to know is that what are carbohydrates? Carbohydrates have 3 examples. Can you list those examples? Those would be monosaccharide, disaccharide, otherwise known as oligosaccharide, and polysaccharide. The monosaccharide would be the least complex. An example of that is glucose. Then you have oligosaccharides or disaccharides. And then you have polysaccharides, which are the most complex. Those examples would be like cellulose and starch would be a polysaccharide. The other types of questions I may ask was from the Mythbusters video. You should know what the independent variable was that they tested, or variables, and the dependent variables, and what the constants and the controls were. The independent variable would be what they changed throughout the experiment. What were the 2 things they were testing? They were testing footballs with what? Regular air or oxygen, and then ones with helium. Those are your independent variables, helium versus oxygen, in the footballs that they were testing. You also need to know what the dependent variables were in that video. The dependent variables are what you get at the end, what your different results are that you get at the end. What they were testing and they were getting were how or what were the different variabilities in distance of a football flying or being kicked or however it was they tested it, how far did it go? That was their dependent variable. That was what they were measuring, distance. Other types of questions would be like, what is the smallest unit of life that can survive and reproduce? That's a cell. What are various species in an area? Like all the cats, bats, dogs, rats, etc. in Wythe County. That would be a community. All the people would be a population. So let's talk about the organization of life. When you had that on your list, you had atom, then molecule, and then organelle, cell, tissue, organ, organ system, organism, population, community, ecosystem, biosphere. And you need to know what the definitions of each of those are. The other things that I may ask you are, what is homeostasis? It's the ability to maintain what type of environment? A balanced one, a constant one. You need to know what a complex set of building blocks are that are strong and would include things like plastic and car tires and little Debbie wrappers, and those are polymers. Remember we said one Lego block is a monomer, and if you put a bunch of those together, you would get a polymer. You need to know what metabolism is. It's all the chemical processes that take place in the human body. DNA and RNA are both types of what? Nucleic acids. Amino acids are linked together with what type bonds? Those are peptide bonds. And if you put a bunch of peptide bonds together, what do you get? You get polypeptides. Lipids. Think about lipids. Think about all the lipids we talked about. What are they? They're oils and waxes and fats and steroids. And a natural steroid in your body is cholesterol or vitamin D. All those are classified as lipids. A minute ago I asked you what a monomer was. Monomer is a simple building block molecule. A polymer is really complex. And then I talked about carbohydrates. What's a building block for carbohydrates? What would those be? What would be the smallest carbohydrate? It would be a monosaccharide. What's the covering on an apple that protects the apple from bruising and insects from eating the apple? That's also a lipid because the apple on the outside has what on it? It has a wax. And a wax is classified as a what? A lipid. Organic compounds contain what element? They contain carbon. A natural steroid in your body, again, is what? It's a lipid. Cholesterol is an example of what inside of your body? It's also a lipid. What are a group of amino acids built together in your body? If you put a bunch of amino acids together, what do you get? You build strong muscles with protein. The form of energy inside your body. That is ATP, which is adenosine triphosphate. pH scale ranges from 0 to 14. What's the neutral number? That would be 7. If you want to be acidic, then do you go below or above 7? You go below. If you want to be basic or alkaline, where do you go? You go above 7. Cells have cell membranes, also known as plasma membranes. What makes up that cell or plasma membrane? You have phospholipid bilayer, which means it's made up of phosphorus and lipids. There's also proteins embedded in there. When a protein becomes denatured, what changes shape? Remember in class we had the Pac-Man, the piece of pizza, and the mouth. What changes shape? The mouth changes shape, which is called the active site. When you have that conglomeration of Pac-Man, the mouth, and the piece of pizza, what is that whole mechanism called? It has 3 names. See if you can think of them. You can pause this if you want to think longer than what I'm giving you. It is called the induced fit model, lock and key mechanism, or enzyme substrate complex. Producers require energy by way of what? They produce their own food with sunlight, methane, some type of other energy other than getting up and going out and picking up a burger or french fries. What's the standard for comparison in a controlled lab experiment? That would be the control. A lake, a pond, a forest would be considered to be what in the order of organization of life? Pyramid. Those would all be ecosystems. Tissues collectively form. Tissues work together to form organs. The entire Earth would be considered to be what on the order of organization of life? It would be a biosphere. A variation of DNA or genetic material. These can happen in the chromosome or the gene, or it can happen where you have an extra or a missing chromosome. Those are called mutations. How organisms are classified? What branch of biology studies that? Taxonomy. The survival of the fittest is known as what? Biology, change, comparative embryology, or natural selection? Your answer should be natural selection. You need to think about the earthworm, mealworm, waxworm experiment that we did. What were the possible errors? Could it have been not using the same method of observation? Could it have been not using the same amount of substance? Could it have been testing an earthworm that had already been previously tested and stressed? Or could it be all of those? It would be all. How many amino acids do you have in your body that exist? In humans, you have 20. What type of solution, if you wanted to transport an organ from one person to another, would you put that organ in? Hypotonic, where too much water would go in. Hypertonic, where too much water would go out. Or isotonic, where the same amount would go in and out and keep the cell the same size. The answer is isotonic. You would keep it on ice. Isotonic solution. Cellulose aids in what? If you eat a salad, it's not really going to give you a lot, but it's going to help keep you regular, help you digest other food, and add bulk and prevent constipation. It's going to do all those things. Protein aids in movement in the body. True or false? The answer is true. What percentage of dry weight is every cell in your body made up of? 25% is protein. So in a cell, 25% of the dry weight inside every cell in your body is made of protein. So protein is really important. 1 gram of a carb is how many calories? 2, 4, 5, or 400? The answer is 4. When birds use oil to keep their wings and feathers in good working order, they are specifically using a what? They're using a lipid. Waxes, oils, fats, and steroids are all lipids. In a solution, the substance that gets dissolved, so the substance that got dissolved in the lab example that I gave you, the loop got dissolved, so it's solute. These are hollow structures that make up the cytoskeleton. You have the cytoskeleton, which is the cell skeleton, which is made of microtubules and microfilaments. The hollow one are microtubules. Who coined the term cells by looking at cork from the cork cambium of a tree? Sliden, Swan, Virchow, or Hook, or Leeuwenhoek? The answer would be Hook. You need to know who the first person was that made the first microscope. Not the type of microscope you think about, but one that's just a regular lens that he ground down. And that was Leeuwenhoek. Who's credited with the cell theory? Sliden, Swan, Virchow, Leeuwenhoek? You would say Sliden, Swan, and Virchow. Microtubules and microfilaments once again make up the cytoskeleton. What structures in a cell hold plant pigment? There's two. Chloroplast for chlorophyll A's and B's, plastids for some of the other pigments. There's a glob inside the nucleus that makes ribosomes. What is that? That is a nucleolus. The solution, again, that makes the cell shrink, makes water go out, would be hypertonic. You're running around the track, your hyper, sweat's going out, not in. So your hypertonic, sweat out, cell smaller. The brain of the cell, nucleus. What pinches off the Golgi and gets rid of waste? It's formed by pinching off the Golgi. That would be lysosomes. What is the movement of water from high to low concentration until equilibrium is reached? Osmosis or diffusion? If it's water, it is osmosis. This is movement of molecules from high to low until equilibrium is reached. Not water, but molecules. Tonicity, osmosis, or diffusion? The answer is diffusion. This type of solution is the type that you place the cell in. So like if it's hypertonic, hypotonic, or isotonic, those various types of solutions are called tonicity. And it's spelled Tonicity. The cell that gains more liquid than it loses, so water goes in, would be a what type solution? Iso, hypo, or hypertonic? Iso, hypo, or hypertonic? It would be hypotonic. The entire cell is either building these with amino acids, making or using these from ribosomes, or packaging and shipping them out via the Golgi. What am I talking about? That's proteins. The ability to maintain constant internal environment is once again homeostasis. Homeostasis provides that constant environment. Hypotheses. What are hypotheses? Are they in the form of a statement? Can they be stated negatively or positively? Are they possibly crude attempts to explain observations? Or are they testable predictions? Or could they be all of those? You would put all of those. If I say Canis latrans, which is a coyote, but I say Canis latrans and it's italicized and the first word is capitalized and the second word isn't, what am I describing? Ecosystem, community, biosphere, organism, or species? You would say species. The control group in an experiment is a standard for comparison. If I give you an example of rats being tested in a lab with regular food or food added with DDT in it, and then they measure the weight of it, what would be the independent variables they're testing? Or what are they manipulating? It would be the food and the food with the DDT. And the dependent variable would be the weight differences they get in these mice or rats that they're testing. Water is an example of a compound. It's got the hydrogen and it's got the oxygen put together, therefore you have a compound. What type of bond is formed whenever atoms share electrons? They're stronger. Covalent. The pH scale ranges from 0 to 14. What number would be acidic? That would be 0 to 6.999. What would be basic or alkaline? Anything above 7. The activities by which cells acquire and process energy are collectively called metabolism. If you put a bunch of monomers together, you get polymers. Plants have large vacuoles. Why? So they can be efficient, so they can live when humans neglect them. They got big vacuoles and they cannot lie. All of those? Or does it say that they can just hold extra food and water? The best answer would be that they want to hold extra food and water. even though humans do sometimes neglect them. Which of the following are not components of all cells? You know what's not in all cells. What does a bacteria not have? It doesn't have a nucleus. One portion of the cell theory states that what? Well, let's just go with what all the cell theory says, and then you'll be able to pick out just one. All cells are made of one or more cells, uni or multicellular. All cells come from other cells. All living organisms have cells. And you have to get cells from cells. The phospholipid bilayer has a head and two tails. The head loves water, so it's called hydrophilic. The tails hate water, so they're called hydrophobic. The heads point outward, the tails point inward. A prokaryote is a bacteria. We just discussed that. And those prokaryotic cells do not have a nuclei. The primary cell sites of ATP synthesis are mitochondria. You need to know the difference between plants and animals, what each of them have that the other one doesn't. Plants have chloroplast, animals don't. Plants have plastids, animals don't. Plants have a big central vacuole, animals don't. Those types of things you need to look at. These organelles are sometimes referred to as rough or smooth. The answer would be endoplasmic reticulum. These structures are primary cellular sites for the production of protein. Ribosomes. This organism is like a whip, like longer structure unlike human sperm. That's a flagella. Which property of water allows bugs to walk on top of the water? Water has opposite charges between the hydrogens and the oxygens, and it creates something called polarity because opposites attract. That polarity, in big quantities, on top of the surface of water, create a film known as surface tension, which aids those buggy wuggies, as I'll call them, walking on top of the water. Which properties cause water to gain and lose heat slowly? This is like the beach. There's always a breeze. You're going to have the land heat up and cool down faster. The water's going to heat up slower and cool down slower. The fact that all of that happens and the water takes a long time to heat up but a long time to cool down, that's called high specific heat. That's why whenever you go to the pool at night, it feels so warm because the outside air is cooler, but the pool is still warm from the day's sunlight and it takes longer for it to cool down. Carbohydrates contain which elements? Remember, they have the element within the name. They have a C, an H, and an O. What do those stand for? Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. Which of the following is a natural steroid in your body? Cholesterols or vitamin D? Or both? You would say both. ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. We discussed that earlier. If you have DNA, it's a nucleic acid. RNA is a nucleic acid. And a nitrogen base, like the A's, T's, C's, and G's, if you put one nitrogen base together with a sugar and a phosphate, collectively that is called a nucleotide. Inside the nucleus in the models in class, we talked about the chromatin looking like spaghetti noodles, or little blue dots on our model, but they look like spaghetti noodles. What does that chromatin coil into? It coils into chromosomes. The glob inside the nucleus that makes ribosomes is called the nucleolus. Everything outside the nucleus is called cytoplasm. The liquid by itself is called what? That would be cytosol. And what are the baby organs called? Organelles. The lysosomes get pinched off of what structure? It has three specific names. Golgi body, Golgi apparatus, or Golgi complex. All are correct. Centrioles are present in animals or involved with what process? Remember I told you that the centrioles were the things that always occur in twos. On our mitosis models, they look like little black dots. And in our animal cell model, they look like green tubular type structures. There's two of them together. Those are centrioles, and they're involved with cell division. Centrioles stay together, and when cell division gets ready to happen, the centrioles start to move apart to try to hold the spindle fibers, which hold the chromosomes. If you have a genetic disorder that causes lysosomal enzymes to have issues, let's just read the specific question. In this disease, a genetic mutation alters the lysosomal enzyme that breaks down gangliosides, which accumulate in nerve cells. Affected children only live to be between the ages of 3 and 5. This is Tay-Sachs. Very sad disease. Which cell wall of plants is thinner? You have two cell walls. You have a primary and a secondary. The primary is going to be thinner. The secondary is going to be stronger. And in plants, which structure makes up the top leafy, waxy layer? So if you have a house plant, on the top of the leaf, it's going to look waxy. Bottom of the leaf, it's not going to look as waxy. It can be waxy on both the under and the upper side, but most of the time it's waxy on the top, not waxy on the bottom. That waxy layer on the top of the leaf is called the cuticle and helps to hold in water and protect the plant. That is our exam, test, bio 101, test review, chapters 1 through 4.